Hello friends, this is Tisha from Meadows and Mortar by Tisha, and today we are going to take this old trunk and we are going to turn it into a coffee table for somebody. Now the first thing that we're going to do is there are some big chunks of rust on this, so I'm going to use some Rust-Oleum Rust Dissolver and I'm just going to spray it on there, and then I used a little spoon to spread it all out because I didn't want to use my finger and I didn't have a glove on, and I just let it sit there for about 30 or 45 minutes, and then I'm going to come in with some steel wool and then I'm just going to kind of scrub it around a little bit. All I'm wanting to do is I'm just wanting to get those big chunks off. I'm not wanting to get it all the way down because you're going to see here in just a little while I am going to use some black wax to shine everything up, but I just want to make sure that it's not got big rust chunks on it that the black wax won't be able to take to, or that it will chip off later on. This piece was actually a barn find that somebody got, and it was one of those things that was just going to get destroyed. So somebody found this and then they decided that they wanted to turn it into a coffee table. Now she asked me to use a blue palette on this. I had some color swatches on a piece of board in my garage whenever she came by, and she was like, oh, I like these three colors right here. So that's what I went with. So I got everything good and cleaned. I used a good degreaser. I had to go over it 4 or 5 times because of all the crud that was built up on it. And then I come in with just some plain water to wipe off all of that excess residue. And then I'm just coming in with a primer. Now I'm using Paint Couture's primer on this, and you can use any kind that you like. You can use the white or the gray. I'm using the gray in this one. And I come in with 2 coats of this, just 2 even coats all the way over. I want to make sure that this old finish doesn't try to bleed through on me. That's really the main thing that I'm wanting to go for. So everything on here gets 2 good coats. I let it dry for a few hours in between each coat, and then I let it dry overnight before I come in with the rest of my finish. So a lot of times people skip this part. They don't like to prime whenever it's just plain wood. I always err on the side of caution. I would rather over prep than under prep because I never want to give somebody a product that doesn't last. I want to make sure that their finish will last as long as they need it to. Luckily, 2 of the colors that the lady pointed out were 2 colors that I actually had in stock. These are from Wise Owl Paint. This is River Rock, which is the greener of the colors, and the Graphic Slate, which is the darker of the colors. And I'm using the River Rock on the inside and the Graphic Slate on the outside, and I'm just blending those 2 together. So I have this in hyper speed for this first pass through, but I will show you here in just a second exactly how I blend these through. So in between my coats, so this is dried for a few hours, and I come in with just a fine grit sandpaper. I think this one may have been a 320, and I'm just barely passing through it. Now I'm not wanting to take this finish off that I just now put on. What I'm wanting to do is I'm just taking my hands and I'm just lightly rubbing across it so that I can get any nubs that have dried in my finish out. Anytime that you are doing a blended finish, you want to make sure that you're using high quality brushes. So on this one, you can see that I'm using a Klingon brush. This is one of the S50 brushes, and these are very, very nice high quality brushes that will give you a nice smooth finish every time. So you can see I'm coming in with that Graphic Slate on all of the outside portions. So this is where I'm wanting it to be darker. So along the edges of it, along the sides of it, that's where I'm going to be using this Graphic Slate. Then I'm going to come in with the River Rock on the inside, and then I will blend them together. So this is actually quite a large area for you to try to be blending all at one time. So if you're not comfortable with blending, you may want to start with just like half of the section, like where the latch is over to the left. Start with that, and then you could go over to the right if you needed to, instead of trying to blend it all together the way that I am. But this is something that you just need to play with on a few pieces until you figure out how blending works for you. So you saw I had the darker all across all of the outside already. Now I'm coming in with this River Rock. It's completely saturated with the River Rock in the middle section, and then you can see that I'm bringing it down into that Graphic Slate, and I do want my colors to overlap because the goal in the end is to make sure that you can't tell where one color starts and one color stops. I want it to be a nice ombre blend so that you can't really differentiate one color from the next. If you can see a line where one color is and then where the next color is, then you have not done your job and you need to do another coat of blending. So a lot of people freak out and they're like, I don't want my colors to touch, but you can't get a good blend unless you do that. So you can see I'm using a light hand. So whenever you see my fingers on my brushes, I'm not holding with like a super tight grip. If somebody were to come back on the back of my handle and slap it, my brush would fall out of my hand. Because if you use a really tight grip on your brushes and you're not loose in your wrists, then that's whenever you're going to get more drag in your paint and you're not going to get them to blend together nicely. You need to use a good light hand or you're not going to get your colors to blend together. And that's one of those things that's kind of hard to teach people without being hands-on with them. But you can see, like, I'm just using like the tips of my fingers to hold my brush, and I'm very light and loosey-goosey in my wrist to be able to get those colors to blend together. Now, a lot of times what I do is I'll use a brush for the dark color, a brush for the light color, and then you can see that I'm coming in with another brush right here. This one does not have any paint on it at all. And I'm using this one to feather everything together. And this is really going to bring everything all together where you're not going to be able to see the two stark colors. It's just going to look like an ombre blend, like they come in together seamlessly. And like I said, you want to make sure that you're using good, soft bristle brushes, nice, good quality synthetic brushes. I love these Klingon brushes. I also love Paint Couture brushes. They are excellent. If you're needing to go with like a hardware store brand, then you would want to use something like a zebra brush. Now, zebra brushes are nice and soft and synthetic, but those are going to be brushes that you're going to get maybe 5 or 10 projects out of. As with these other brushes like the Klingon or the Paint Couture brushes, you're going to be getting, hundreds of uses out of them. So really you get what you purchase. The money is a big factor. I understand that it is a lot of money paying, $20 for a brush or $30 for a brush. Seems like a lot, but these are going to be good quality brushes that you can reuse over and over again. As long as you rinse them out afterwards, make sure that you get all the paint out of the bristles. I promise you will get hundreds of uses out of these. So I paint almost every single day. And I've had some of these brushes for 6 years and I still use them all the time because they are nice, good quality brushes. Now, I do not have a link for Wise Owl paint, but I do have a link for both the Klingon brushes and the Paint Couture brushes, and I will put those in the description box below if you're ever interested in trying those. Like I said, if you're wanting to use a hardware store brand, I would recommend the zebra brushes. Those are also good brushes, but you're just not going to be getting hundreds of uses out of them like this. So I'm just going to show you, I do the same thing all across this whole piece. So that first part that I just showed you was just on the very front. So now I'm going to do the top and then the sides. And I'm going to do it the same way. I'm going to do the dark areas first, come in with my River Rock, which is my lighter color in the middle. Then I'm going to mix them all together. Now you can see on this top part, I'm going to start using some swirling motion to swirl it all together, and then I'll do some side to side, some up and down, some diagonals, and that's really going to blend everything together nicely. And then I will come back in with my final brush, which is going to be my clean, dry, neutral brush, and then I'm just going to feather it all together just to make sure that you can't see the edges and you can't see where one color starts and one color stops. So this is a beautiful shot of how you can tell the difference between the two colors that I have. But now I'm going to come in with just a round swirling motion and just blend the two together. Now you can still see those swirl marks that are on there. So then that's whenever I'm going to come in with that clean, dry, neutral brush, and that's really going to feather everything together and make it look like it's more cohesive. So you can see I've blended them together. They're closer together now than they were, but I still need to go back and forth, up and down. I'll probably do some diagonals, and then that's really going to make everything nice and cohesive. Now, sometimes whenever you're doing this, you may end up getting a little bit too much paint on your brush, so then you may need to wipe it off on a rag, or if you're like me, your pants, and then to make sure that you're getting your brush nice and clean and dry again. So you can see how I'm doing like the corners and the diagonals, and then I'm coming through just with one final motion, left and right, to make sure that everything is nice and smoothed out. So you can't see those colors as stark as what you could before. And if you're doing a technique like this and you realize that your blended finish does not look good, don't freak out. Let it dry. Add another coat onto it. You can do as many coats on this as you want until you get the finish that you want. Blending is something that does take time. It is some trial and error, but I promise after you try it a few times, you're going to be like, dang, I love doing this. And it's okay if you have to do it more than once. I do a minimum of 2 coats on my blended finishes. Sometimes I do 3 because even after the second coat, it still doesn't look the way that I want. After all of my paint is good and dry on all areas, then I'm going to come in with some black wax. There are many different black waxes out there, but I'm using Annie Sloan's. That's something that I just have in hand. I like her wax because it's a firmer wax. I don't like softer waxes for doing the detail areas like this, but you can use whatever kind you like. I'm just taking a thin artist brush and I'm just putting it in the recessed areas. I'm using a very, very minimal amount of this black wax. A little goes a long way. So I use that thin little artist brush. I put it in the grooves, and then you can see I come in with a fatter, softer brush, and then I'm just going to feather it all out to make it look like it has more of like a smudgy effect. So we're looking for, like, if you do makeup, instead of just doing regular eyeliner, we're doing like a smoky eyeliner. So you put the thick part on, and then you're going to feather it out. And then I just do the same thing in all of the recessed areas on this piece. And then I'm also adding some of the black wax underneath where the handles are and just where I would like to accentuate some of the darkness, because this is an old traveling trunk and I want it to look like it's more worn. So the lady whose house that this is going to be going in, she sort of showed me some of her decor, some of the things that she likes and she doesn't like. She showed me the wall color in her home, and I really thought that adding this extra black wax to give like the smudgy, smeary effect would look great for her. Then I come in with some Paint Couture Extreme Guard. This is going to be my top coat. And if you don't feel comfortable adding your top coat over top of your black wax, that's fine. You can do this step before your black wax. I prefer the way that my accent waxes look whenever I apply it onto raw paint. But if you don't feel comfortable with that because the manufacturer says to add wax last, then by all means you can switch these 2 steps. It's not going to be the end of the world. So I just come in with this Paint Couture Extreme Guard. I do 2 nice coats over all of it. I give it a few hours to dry in between, and this is going to give it a nice protective layer. Another reason that I'm going to be doing this is because I'm also going to be adding some crackle to this, and I wanted to make sure that whenever I was trying to define my crackle, that I would be able to wipe away the excess on the areas that the crackle was not on a little bit easier. So that's why I need to go ahead and do this Extreme Guard before I do the crackle. I will have a link to the Extreme Guard in the description box below. If you decided that you didn't want to use this Paint Couture product, if you're wanting to use the Wise Owl product, then they have really good top coats. Their varnish is really good. I also love their 1 hour enamel because it's ready to use in 1 hour. You don't have to wait a couple days for it to set up and work. It can go straight in use after that. My only thing is, if you're using the 1 hour enamel, make sure that your temperature is correct. Look on the back of the container to see what the temperature needs to be, because if not, then you can get some crackling with that, which would be perfect for this piece because I'm adding crackle anyways. But let's say that you were going with more of a sleek, polished look. If your temperature is not correct with that 1 hour enamel, you will get crackling. So just remember that. Now we're going to get back to this beautiful cast iron hardware. I come in with Redesign with Prima's wax, and this one is called Galaxy. This is just a black wax. I use a little artist brush and then I just rub it on there. So whenever I put this black wax all over top of all of the hardware and the metal areas, the little brackets around the edges of it, I left it on there for probably an hour, and then I come back in with a soft cloth. I just used that little microfiber cloth that's over there on the right hand side. Then I come back with that, and then I just buff it out. So I just lightly rub over top of it, and that just gets away any of the excess of the wax that's on there so that it won't rub off on your hands. Whenever you're trying to buff away wax, you want to rub until you don't feel any drag on your rag, and then it should be fine to go. So if you're still having drag on there, then you haven't buffed it away enough. So then I come in with Paint Couture Crackle. This is a two-step crackle. So I put the one step on there anywhere that I'm wanting to show crackle, and you let it dry for about 30 minutes, 45 minutes, until whenever you touch it with your fingers, it's sticky. Once that it's sticky, then you come in with step 2 and you go over those same exact areas so you can see that it dries clear once that it's dry. Then I add step 2 right over top of those areas, and then you're going to let that part dry overnight, or if you don't want to wait all night long, then you can wait about 8 hours or so until it's good and dry. Now I come in with River Rock, and I just thinned this down with some water, and I'm putting this straight over top of my crackled areas, and then I'm going to take a rag and then I'm going to wipe back the excess. And whenever I wipe back the excess, then it's going to just settle inside of those cracks, and then it's really going to accentuate those areas. So it's going to look like this piece. I'm using the same color that I used as one of my colors, so remember that. This is just going to make it look more worn, like it is aged authentically over time. And so I'm going to have some dark areas and some light areas in there. Now on the inside of it, I did not want to neglect the inside. So she wanted me to leave the original paper over there in the top of it. So I come in with my Surf Prep sander. I used an 80 grit, and then I went over it again with a 120 grit just to get everything nice and smooth. And then I come in with Wise Owl's Furniture Salve. I use the tobacco flower scent because that is my absolute favorite. And this is going to hydrate that wood on the inside. It is going to leave it with a really nice finish, and it is going to make sure that this product is going to last forever and ever for this family. So look at this. This beautiful, beautiful trunk is now ready to be used as a coffee table. I am so glad that she chose me to do this project for her, and I am so, so glad that this did not get thrown away. And guys, if this inspired you all, then just give my video a like. If you haven't already, follow along. And guys, thank you all so much for watching.